Hey guys, sorry again about the Zoom snafu earlier. Hopefully this video will be a little bit more focused so you can work through it a little faster. I will mention right before I dive into Maya that I'm working out of my project directory in Google Drive, so if you want any of the assets in this demo, they're just in the assets directory. I'm working on Sal, but there's also the character from the character generator, Ev, which you can grab as well if you want. I would really recommend that you right click and copy versus dragging and dropping because that will remove it from my folder. So please don't do that. Alright, so with that being said, you can see here I've got mine open. I've imported Sal into the scene instead of referencing. Uh, Importing him in is fine because this is the only thing that is in the scene, and for this workflow it should be the way that you want to get things going. So you can see right away if I select the head that Sal has a skin cluster, so that means that Sal has paint weights. So if I were to rotate the joint, you can see his head is rotating as well. But what we're going to do is add in a blend shape deformer, which is a whole nother node, and you can stack this in addition to the skin cluster and use them together. You don't have to pick one or the other, which is pretty great. The first thing that you want to do when working with or creating a blend shape, I would recommend using the new workspace. It's way better for this process. So if you just go to pose sculpting, you're going to have access to your shape editor tab. This I think is the default. This is the one you want to be working in because it makes all these future steps way easier. It's just part of the UI. The first step being selecting the head and creating a blend shape, which you rename something so that you can find it. I like to call it face blend shape because maybe there will be a body blend shape and I can name that differently. The next step is to create some targets for your blend shape. To do that, you want to select your blend shape, go to create, add target. The first time through, make sure to hit the options so that you can set the type to be specifically object space. You don't want to use tangent space or transform space, you want to use object space. So with that, you should know that you're successful because the indicator is orange versus like a greenish bluish color. And with this, I'm going to be sculpting a blink, and it will be for the right side. So we'll call it R blink. And then immediately hit this red button to turn off edit, because what I want to do is work on a copy versus on the head itself. I just find that to be a little safer. You can accidentally edit the head sometimes, and that will cause big problems in the futures. And if you're working on a duplicate, you're never going to have to worry about that. So by right-clicking on your target and saying rebuild target, you're going to see down here in my outliner that it's made a new mesh, and that mesh is named the exact same thing as my blend shape, so it's easy to select. Then you can just move it over and start to work on this and edit this thing. And how blend shapes work is that any edit that you make to this, as long as the influence is set to 1, you'll see that change represented on the main head. As I dial this up and down, you can see the main head is using none of it, or 100%, or some value in between. Cool. So what I wanted to use this shape for is to make a blink. So I'll be working on the eye here. This character was modeled with pretty good edge flow, so I'm able to just double click on this edge ring and it grabs the entire loop. If I tap a B, then I actually get this soft selection. The yellow part is influenced 100%, and then it falls off to where there is no influence. Because it's like that, I can switch to the scale tool, scale it in one direction, and it will pinch it all together into this flat thing. Then what I'll do is kind of test my shape, see what it's looking like. By dialing this back and forth, I can see that the corner of the eye here and the corner of the eye here is shifting around a lot. That's not super realistic, so I can come in and make further edits by grabbing, switching over to vertex instead of edge. Grab one of these corner verts, maybe this one, yeah, like that one. Dial up the fall off a little bit and push it down. Now let's give it a test and see if the corner of the eye is, yeah, it's staying put a little bit better. So I'll repeat that process for the corner. Grab one of these over here and push that up. So it looks like those points are staying in place a little bit better. This is a very quick demo on creating a blend shape. Really, I spend quite a long time sculpting these things and making them look a lot better. But for the sake of brevity, the process is the same. It's just how careful you are with creating your shape is the thing that would take up more time. But let's say that I've called it good and this R blank is ready to go. What I can do now is actually delete this one because I no longer need my duplicate anymore, and create a left blank by reusing my right blank. If you look at this head, you can see that it's actually symmetrical. So all the stuff on this side matches exactly all the stuff on this side. And what that does is it allows you to use blend shapes that are maybe only on one side on the other side. To get that going, what you can do is right-click on your target, duplicate the target. Then if I rename this before I lose it, that will help me, to L blank. With it selected, I'll right-click on it and say flip target. Bam. Now I've got a left blank. And you can see that my right blank is still in place, and it only affects that side. The left blank is now in place, and it only affects that side. If I select them both at the same time, dial them together, now I've got some blinking going on. So that's looking good. So I've got a left blink and a right blink on my blend shape. Nailing it. So the next step is to try and connect those blend shapes to a control, because the controls are the things that you're actually going to be animating. You're not going to be animating or putting keyframes on your blend shapes. So I will hide my character real quick and switch my view to front view for this next step, which is creating a little bit of UI. So I will make a NURB circle, zoom out a little bit, you can see it's flat. This is my front view. So really what I need to do is, instead of the normal being on the Y, set that to 0, I'll make the normal on the Z. And so now that's facing my NURB circle front ways. Then I'll also shrink down my radius to something like 0.2, because what I want to do is have my control go from 0 on the Y up to 1 on the Y, like that. So that's going to be my maximum value, and then this is going to be my minimum value. So to limit stuff, first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm naming my controls. There you go, our brow control. And then now that I've got it named right, I can flip over to my attribute editor, make sure that I'm selecting my R brow control tab. And within this, I've got a bunch of different options. You should see, I guess, all of these. The one that you want to mess with is this limit information. If you drop that down, you should see translate, rotate, and scale. The one that we want to control is here in translate, specifically the Y max, or sorry, the Y min and the Y max. The minimum value that we're ever going to let this control go to is 0, and the maximum that we'll ever let it go to is 1. So now that I've changed those two things, you can see if I dial this up and down, even though my mouse continues to go up, I'm holding it down, it is stuck here at 1, which is really nice for not losing track of your control. Also, it sticks at 0, so it won't ever let it go any less than 0. Now that I've got my limit information in place, the next step that I want to do is create maybe a little bit of a border, so I can just have a visual indicator of where I'm at in my max and min. So I will select my control, duplicate, scale it up slightly, and then start to mess with the individual control points on this NURBS curve by right-clicking on it and do control vertex. So I can move this top half up about halfway, and then move just these up the rest of the way like that. I'll scale that out. Then what I want to do is move this up to its maximum value and adjust these points so that my control kind of stays within my border. Hopefully this will make sense here in a second, why I'm going to this great length. There we go. Okay, cool. So now that I have that, the reason that I've done that is so I kind of have this little container now. So if I move my control starting down here, move it up here, you can see, like, without looking at the values over here in my channel box, I can see, you know, I'm about 3/4 of the way up, I'm all the way up, I'm halfway, I'm at the beginning. It just makes it a little easier when you're animating to kind of know where you're at. Now that I've done that, I don't want to be able to select this border. I only want to be able to select the inside control. So I can turn this into an unselectable object by going back to my attribute editor. I'll zip everything up. The tab that we want is here in the display. Drop that down. Go to drawing overrides, check that, and flip it to reference. Now that I've done that, I can't select things in the viewport. I can still select it over here in the outliner, but if I'm just working and animating, it makes it a little bit easier. So now that I've done that, I'll rename this from control 1 to border. Oops, I'll mistype like that. Cool, and then I will group these as a final step. The reasoning for that shall become clear in a second. If I reveal Sal, you'll see my control is huge. But because I put everything in a group, you can move that group up, maybe here next to the head, scale down that group like that. And then what you'll see is, even though this is much tinier, I'm still able to go from 0, here in my channel box, you see my translate value is 0, all the way up to 1. And it still is functioning exactly the same because the thing that I changed was the group and not the control itself. All my hard work at the beginning is maintained, which is great. The last thing that I'll mention about this control, I'll often hide or lock everything that I don't want to be part of animation. So to do that, you can click and drag on all the properties that you aren't going to be animating with, which is basically everything except this translate Y. You can right click on it and say lock and hide selected. Once you've done that, the only thing left is my translate Y. So it makes it a little easier to see what's going on with your control. Cool, so now that you kind of have this little bit of a template, you don't have to do all that work again if you want a left blink control. All you have to do is select the group, duplicate, slide it over, and then you can even use the modify, search, and replace. You can look for R, replace with L. Scavan. Now you have L brow group, control, and border. You can delete that. Cool. So now that I have right and left controls, what I want to do is link these to these. To get that going, I'll select my control, come over here to my channel box, select translate Y, go to edit, and set driven key. Slide this over here, and with my control selected, I'll load driver, make sure that my Y translate is the thing that's driving it. Then the next step is I'll click on my left blend, or sorry, face blend shape, right click on it, select blend shape node. Then go to my set driven key menu, load driven. You'll see that I have my right blink and left blink blend shapes in here. What I'm working on right now is right blink. Right blink is set to 0. The control is also set to 0, so I can key that. Right blink has blue in there indicating that a set driven key has been set. Now I can select my control first, move it up, select my blend shape second, dial it all the way up, and key. Now, if I get my menu out of the way, if I click my control, you can see as I drag it back and forth, this is now kind of an animatable control. I'll repeat that process with the left and then show how that can get put on the timeline after that. So with my left control selected, we'll say load driver, select Y channel, click the left blink shape instead of the right blink shape. Control is set to 0, blink is set to 0, key. Blue indicator indicates set driven key has been set. I'll dial up my control first, dial up my blend shape second, and key. So now you can see that that is updating as well. Perfect. I'll go ahead and close this menu for now. Go to Pose Sculpting, switch it back to Maya Classic, switch my view back to Perspective View, and you'll see how easy it is to keyframe these because they're just a single channel. So if I come over here to maybe to like frame 12, I'll grab both these keys, hit S. You can see that I now have a red tick on my Translate Y. Go forward maybe 2 frames, dial them all the way closed, and hit S again. So now you can see it's blinking over a 2-frame period, and then maybe I'll give it a few frames to ease out, like that. Hit S again. So it takes him a little longer to open his eyes. And if I come back here to frame 0, oh, come on, there you go, and hit play, blink. So good to go. These keyframes are reusable just like other ones. So if I copy, we could paste, maybe and paste right afterwards. Paste one here. Now I've got a bunch of blinks. 1 and then 2 in a row. Blink, blink, and then 1 over here. Blink. So there you go. That's as quick and easy as it is to animate controls that are set to a single blend shape. If you have any questions on this process, please bring them to class on Monday. And like I said, these assets are available in my directory if you wanted to mess around with them in your own project. Cool. Well, I hope this helps, and I'll see you then.